country is in desperate need of gun control.
You want to take away my rights?
Neither of you know as much about gun violence as you think you do.
I first spoke to Adam Conover, host of Adam Ruins Everything, in 2015, shortly after his myth-busting show migrated from College Humor's online channel to TruTV's cable channel.
It's a gateway drug.
Yeah, educators have been saying that for years, but it's not true.
Since then, a lot has changed.
Donald J. Trump is now president of the United States.
You are fake news, sir.
A new president, a new media landscape, some might say, a new reality. So I wanted to talk to Conover, who's about to go on a live tour and launch the new season, about what it's like to make a show that seeks to uncover hidden truths in what some have called the post-truth era. Adam, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be back and talk to you more.
We should mention at the top that I'm actually married to the casting director of your show, so take that for whatever it's worth, dear viewers.
She does great work independently of how well this interview goes, so it's fine. Her job is not on the line. I can say you're non-biased.
Last time we talked, it was 2015.
Yeah.
The world is a different place now. We've
Very
got a different president, obviously, and everything feels a little bit different, and especially in terms of getting to the truth, which is what your show is about. I feel like I'm constantly just having to wade through BS to get to the truth of any story. So how has that changed how you approach what you do at Adam Ruins Everything, if at all? And do you agree with that characterization?
I agree with that characterization. It's definitely a different world in terms of, the information ecosystem beyond everything else. I mean, I think that when we're looking back at this time period in 50 or 100 years, the rise of social media as a information distribution tool is going to very obviously be the most disruptive, and I mean that in the good and bad sense, mostly the bad sense for the purpose of this conversation, like change possible, right? That like the ways of, transmitting information, the ways people get information are so out there and difficult to understand, and we're only really grasping now what the shift has meant, right? And that no time more obviously than from this time span we're talking about, 2015 to now. But it hasn't changed the way that we make our show or what we think that our show can do. People still have a deep down desire to learn, to find out the truth. People don't like bullshit. They want to find out the real story. If you present them clearly and respectfully with, here are the facts as best we know them, here are my sources, I did my research, I'm speaking to you with intelligence and respect as sort of intellectual equals here. People still love that, they still want that, and they will still take that information, or at least there's a large number of people who will take that information more seriously than, shit that pops up on Facebook or whatever. I guess what has happened is I've a little bit let go of the idea that we can reach absolutely everybody. That's still our goal. It has always been my goal. I used to believe it was a little bit more possible to get to 100% of the audience taking in our message and, understanding it and having it change their perspective. I still shoot for that, but now I feel like it's a little bit more, we approach it asymptotically. Is that the word? Like you reach a limit past which it's like, all right, maybe I'm not going to get that last 5% because they are really in a, whirlpool of bad information, and certain people who the informational world they live in is so distorted that it's very hard to get through. But I'm always trying to learn how to do that and try to be more effective as a communicator in that way.
Yeah, and I think anyone who's in the business of trying to communicate ideas, which we are, has kind of run up against that and had that realization in the past few years. And one of the episodes that you did that kind of speaks to that is you had the character Emily ruin an episode of Adam Ruins Everything, which was a really interesting episode for many reasons. But one of them was you talked about something called the backfire effect.
Yep. Your entire show is built around the idea that if you present someone with better information, you can change their mind. But the surprising truth is disproving a misconception can actually strengthen a person's belief in that misconception. It's called the backfire effect.
By the way, like all effects in psychology, there's debate about how strong it is, to what degree it exists, how reproducible it is, etc. Right? And I've heard people say, "Oh, hey, a follow-up study showed such and such a result didn't show up," but apart from that, it's a the phenomenon clearly occurs, and it's helpful when you're thinking about how to be, an effective communicator. So the backfire effect is an effect by which when you give someone information that contradicts their beliefs, no matter how factual it is, no matter how, say, hey, I've got my sources all right here, look at the data, it will actually increase their confidence in their prior belief, right? Basically, if you attack someone's beliefs, they get their defenses up. That's the simple version of it. And there's a lot of different reasons why it happens. One of them is, that I think is the strongest, is identity protective cognition, which is sort of a related effect that's part of, under the umbrella of the backfire effect, as far as I understand it. I'm a dilettante about all these subjects, so I give you my dumb version, right? But I'm the guy who knows a little bit about a lot of things. That's why I do this TV show. But the identity protective cognition is that when you have built your identity on a particular set of facts, right? Say you are a climate change denying author, right? You have written books on this topic. You are invited to speak to events on this topic. You have friends in this community, right? Your literal, not just psychological, but social identity is built on this fact, right? So the cost for you on a personal level, if you were to back off of that, is enormous, right? You would lose all that work. You would lose all those friends. Imagine if Sean Hannity, right, decided tomorrow, he's like, you know what? I actually don't think Trump is the greatest guy, right? Like, imagine how personally devastating that would be for him, right? So as a result, because of that, those incredible stakes, you end up coming up with different rationalizations for your old belief, right? When you're presented with that contradictory evidence, you immediately marshal every fact at your disposal to wall off that initial belief and protect it because it's so core to you. Yeah. And the thing is, smart people are actually better at this because they have more information that they can pull from, right? They have more facts off the top of their heads, right?
Yeah. I mean, you see these big debates between, a creationist and a scientist, and the creationists will sometimes win the debate just because they're so steeped in that. And these are people that can just marshal they've memorized all the kind of propaganda.
And it's a good point about, when you hear, this was a really interesting idea that was presented to me, was that, when someone says so much, hey, why don't you debate me? Debate me on this. I want you to debate me, right? That's a little bit of a trap, right? Because we want to think that debate is this like rational, perfect way of, figuring out who's right and who's wrong, right? Yeah. But the fact is, ideologues are, they have better scripts, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? They have it really, it's a thick groove in their minds, right? That they can go back to this. The perfect example is cults, right? If you go up to a Scientologist, if you walk into the Scientology Center, you're never going to win a debate with anyone in that building. You're not going to be able to go in and say, I can prove Scientology isn't real. It can't be done, right? The reason it can't be done is because all of the stuff they're going to throw back at you is what worked on them. Right? Yeah. They were all given. Like, they had a debate with someone when they went in, they lost. That's why they're in the Scientology Center now, right? And so that sort of like, why won't you debate me on this? That's why it's a trap, right? Because they know all the things that are going to feel really good in the moment. All the facts that you don't have the immediate answer to, right? Going back to the backfire effect quickly, we had a professor on who wrote a little pamphlet called The Debunker's Handbook, which I suggest your audience goes and looks up online because it's a really wonderful little couple pages on how to get over the backfire effect. And he came on our show and explained how to get over the backfire effect, the most effective techniques. And the interesting thing was, they were actually all things we already do on our show and that I had sort of stumbled into as a comedian without realizing it, right? So one of them, for instance, is you can't just give someone facts that show why they're wrong. You have to, when someone has an incorrect belief, there's often a narrative around it, right? Why those climate change, those people pushing it, they're just bought off by so-and-so. It's a conspiracy by these people, right? There's a story in their minds. And so what you need to do is you need to replace the bad story with a good story, right? The narrative is very, very powerful. And that's what our show is built on, right? When we say, hey, you have this idea that the diamond engagement ring, to go back to our oldest segment, the diamond engagement ring is this age-old tradition. That's the story you know. The actual story is that the De Beers diamond cartel came up with it in the 30s to sell more diamonds. That's both true and a more interesting story. That's more memorable. And so it sticks in your mind more effectively.
And I mean, that feels very much like the era we're in is this era of dueling stories, dueling narratives. And we see it in a way in the reactions to your show, because if you go on YouTube, you'll see hundreds, maybe thousands of response videos to Adam Ruins Everything.
Yes.
Today on Infertility TV, we are going to address a recently released video from comedian Adam Conover.
Classic, très fashionable, daring do.
Actually, all these frames are exactly the same.
Actually, we just seen all the glasses, and each pair was completely different from the last.
Do you ever watch any of them? Are there any that have changed your mind? What do you think of that entire phenomenon?
That's a really good question and a really complex one. You know, I do watch them. I don't watch all of them, and I don't watch all of every single one of the ones that I watch. You know, it's a little painful to watch them. You know, it's an ego hit. You know, it's like, oh, this person's mad at me. Oh, gee, I was, you know, our show is very well intentioned. My character on the show is, you know, like taking people down, you know, but like our show is really trying to get as many people on board to try to share the interesting knowledge that we have with people. And when we are trying to debunk an idea, our goal is always to, you know, widen the possibilities for people, right? Say, hey, you don't have to be held back by this idea. You can go do anything in the world, right? Or, hey, if we change our behavior this way, we'll be more effective in the world. It's very positive, right? And these responses are always so negative, you know. Oh, Adam Ruins Everything's bullshit. He's lying to you. You know, he's biased in all these ways. I do look for the videos that are made a little bit more even-keeled, right? And, you know, I do really try to pay attention to when I think we have actually gotten things incorrectly. In that same episode you mentioned, Emily Ruins, Adam Ruins Everything, we did a segment where we corrected our mistakes. And we have an upcoming episode this year coming out in 2019 that'll be similar. We really try to look at the counter arguments that our segments are getting and try to address those online. So for instance, we got a lot of response videos to our segment on electric cars.
But this last episode on Tesla, well, let's just say his arguments were weak and misleading.
The process of manufacturing a car, the embodied emissions in that car are often greater than the emissions that the engine would produce, right? Or at least they're a huge factor of it, right? And so if you're the type of person who buys a new car every 3 years, that is far more important than the engine that's in your car, right? Now, there's obviously gradations of that. If you're going from like a clunker old pickup truck to a Tesla, that's a big change, right? But if you're going from a Prius, from like a, you know, a late model Prius to a Tesla, right? Then you're actually increasing your carbon footprint. What you should really do is drive the Prius into the ground, because the Prius is pretty efficient, or any other hybrid, and then buy a used Tesla, right? That is as or more impactful of a choice than just saying like, hey, sign me up for Elon's like electric dream machine, right?
You attacked the Elon fan club, which is kind of notoriously defensive.
Notoriously defensive. And that's a huge example of identity protective cognition, right? Because Elon, oh my gosh, this guy is the best, speaking of narrative, this guy built the best narrative for himself ever, right? He says, I am the man of science, I'm the man of action, I can do the thing that no one else can do, right? Failure is good, wonderful thing that he promotes, the idea that failure is good. And if you buy my product, you can be like me, right? It's as a result, like people build their identities around this, you know? And so I had videos made by, I mean, these were folks saying that I was biased against Tesla, and they were making videos where they're literally wearing Tesla like jackets, and they've got Tesla memorabilia up in their filming studio, and underneath the video it says click here, because they have an affiliate link where if you sign up to buy a Model 3, they'll get, you know, a little kickback. And you know, that doesn't mean their arguments are wrong, but like that's where they're coming from, right? At the same time, we got enough responses to that segment that I concluded, look, everything we said in the segment was true, but I felt that we didn't present it with enough nuance, right? That my ruin of it was a little bit presented as a slam dunk. Don't buy the electric car. You know, when really it's like, you know, more like, like buying an electric car is a more nuanced, equivocal thing when it comes to green stuff. And the real message is use what you can as long as you have. But if you buy an electric car, you know, when your old car breaks down, if you buy a used one, hey, that's pretty good. We say all those things, but you know, it was just I felt that, you know, people had taken the wrong message, and maybe I bore some responsibility for that. So we spoke to that in our in the episode Emily Ruins, Adam Ruins Everything. At the same time, you know, some of the response videos I have no idea how to respond to. You know, we did a video on why alpha males don't exist in humans.
What up, freaks? Name's Alpha Adam. I'm confident, straight up banging, and if you think women don't love me, I'm gonna debunk the F out of that myth.
No, not like that guy at all. Being a rude dickhead doesn't make you an alpha male. Sure, some alphas are. I'm not denying that, but this is just a gross mischaracterization. It's almost like they don't know what real alphas are like.
It's just an unscientific idea. It's not part of biology, sociology, anthropology. Like, it just doesn't exist. It exists in some animals. We talk about how it doesn't exist in wolves. That's a myth and has an interesting story behind it. But like, you know, there's no person who researches humans on the planet who would tell you there's such a thing as an alpha male, right? It's complete pseudoscience. And so we did a video on that, and that got the most negative response we've ever gotten, right? We've got so many videos of people calling me a beta male cuck, shit like that, you know? And I don't know how to respond to that. That is the most identity protective cognition,
that's just name calling. And I mean, making a response video, calling someone a beta cuck is really the most alpha thing that you can do,
exactly.
But there's an older episode where you have a Dr. Oz-like character.
We're doing kind of a show within the show thing here today. See, look, there's my camera, there's your camera. See, my camera, your camera's on my camera. Ooh, so meta.
You're critiquing the way that nutrition advice is dispensed, but really the bigger critique seems to be the way expertise is presented in the media. What do you think the major problems are with the way that expertise is presented these days in media?
There's a lot of experts who, the reason they're experts on television is they're very good at being on television, you know? And that doesn't mean that they don't know what they're talking about, right? But like, hey, why is Neil deGrasse Tyson like the only astrophysicist, you know, you see on television? Well, hey, he's great on television, you know? But that does limit our, you know, the range of perspectives that we get. And, you know, some of those people are better at being on television than they are at being scientists. So one of the things that we try to do on our show that I really pride us on is that, you know, we don't bring people on the show because they have a book to promote. We have them on the show because they are actually the subject matter expert. And in many cases, they're the expert who we're basing our segment on. You know, this is the historian who wrote the book on X. This is the journalist who broke the story on Y, right? This is the person who, you know, was covered in the article that we read that, you know, really knows the thing. Man, I love talking to those people, and I love bringing them on television because, like, a lot of them, you know, would not go on TV otherwise, right? We had this guy on for our immigration episode, who for our episode on the wall and why the border wall, you know, why building a literal border wall would be counterproductive.
It's counterintuitive, but building a wall wouldn't stop people from coming in. It would actually stop them from going back.
In fact, the whole idea of building a border wall is misguided. The Mexican economy is doing quite well right now, and population growth has slowed way down, so there's not much pressure to immigrate.
Our expert we had on that was a researcher who has gone down to the border every year for, I believe, since the 70s, and just done field research on how many people are crossing the border. He goes around with a notebook and he interviews people. You know, he is doing straight up field research, how many people are crossing the border, and he has a data set that is massive and that he told me the government uses his data set, right? And so he came on our show and he told us, hey, the level of border crossings currently is the lowest it's ever been, or the lowest it's been in decades, right? This is the motherfucker who knows. You don't normally see that guy on TV. Guess what? Because he's not, you know, he's not great in the CNN 4 heads-up display, right?
Yeah,
you know,
in those contexts, it seems like the requirement is you have a strong opinion about something and you can state it in a, you know, soundbite.
Yes, exactly. So. But we have the people on who have actually seen the work on the ground. I think one of the best things our show is able to do is when we can boost the signal of folks like that who are actually uncovering the knowledge, right? But whose message wouldn't normally be heard by, the average comedy viewing audience, right?
There's another older episode where you're kind of in a coffee shop with this anti-technology hipster.
The internet's destroying society. Sorry. I should tweet that.
No, you shouldn't. And no, it isn't.
Oh God, they're multiplying.
You kind of take him back through this litany of complaints, going all the way back to Socrates complaining about the written word. Which is, I really appreciate and I love it. But
Thank you.
I do wonder, you do come through that YouTube ecosystem. The show started on College Humor on YouTube and then migrated to cable. So you're very familiar with that world, I would say. It is undeniable, I think, that media does change your perception, the kind of media you're taking in. So how do you think, as someone who's kind of steeped in that world, how do you think this more fractured media environment is changing people's perception of reality, I guess?
That's a really good question. I think it's changing it quite a lot, and I think it's very hard for us to even understand currently the scope of how much it's changing.
Yeah.
That segment, that was our episode, Adam Ruins the Internet, and that was strangely one of the episodes that I think has become out of date the quickest. Because that idea of everyone complains about their cell phones, but I say at the end, look, this is a great communication tool. People are connecting with each other in ways they couldn't before. How is that anything other than a massive social good, I say at the end. Well, I think we're starting to see ways in which it's not, right? I mean, at the very least, that's Facebook's ethos, right? Facebook is saying, hey, we connect people. That's an unequivocal good, right? Connecting, that's important. That's basically charity. You should all be thanking me, Mark Zuckerberg, for connecting everybody, right? And now we kind of know, hold on a second, connecting people willy-nilly, in this sort of random, huge way is like, oh my God, that is having some unintended consequences, right? I used to think, oh my God, it's so amazing that people with common interests can find each other. But hey, there's certain people with common interests who, when they find each other, that makes them able to form cults and terrorist sects. Terrorist sects? No, terrorist sects.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get a terrorist sext.
Something I thought a lot about lately is that we've gone from one to many to many to many, right, in terms of our broadcast. It used to be that we had, NBC, ABC, CBS, and then later cable, and then we all received, right? And then the internet, the great promise is anyone can talk to anyone. Oh my gosh, incredible. The gatekeepers are gone, right? Oh, great. Tear down the gates. Let's all be free. I think we're realizing that some of the things the gatekeepers were doing was good, right?
Yeah.
That there are certain ideas that you want a person in a position of expertise to be able to tell you with authority, this is not true, right? If you just look at, people started saying a couple years ago, they say, hey, where did all the KKK and Nazi guys come from? They're back, right? Well, actually what happened was they were always there, right? They were a small minority, they were always there, but the thing was they weren't allowed on TV. They were only allowed to go on, Jerry Springer, where everyone would yell and throw fruit at them, right?
Yeah.
With the internet, holy crap, now they can broadcast like everybody else, and so their voices have risen in a way. Now, I don't think that means that we should stifle those communication tools by any means, right? But it's an unintended consequence of that ethos of more connection is always better that we're grappling with, and that we don't yet know how to handle. I'm starting to crave, holy crap, I think I want a little more, not gatekeeping, but I want those authority figures.
Maybe curation.
Back. Curation, I want curation, I want that security of someone who knows more than me telling me and telling other people in a big way.
Well, one example of that, and you appeared on Bill Maher's show and talked about this a little bit. It was right on the heels of Alex Jones, the conspiracy theorist, getting kicked off of just about every platform.
Yep.
And you seem to be saying that it was a problem because, for instance, YouTube was making money off of his lies.
I don't like Alex Jones, but Alex Jones gets to speak.
Everybody gets to speak. You know, this is not the internet of 1996 where you put up a website and, you know, he's using like the public pipes. Like these companies, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, these are the majority of time Americans spent on the internet, right? We're talking these, for the internet, this is ABC, CBS, NBC, right? And they're making money off of him. They're running ads against him. So, you know, I agree with you about free speech, and that's of concern to me as well. I also don't think those companies should be profiting off of what he's saying. I don't advocate for particular people to be deplatformed or for them to not have platforms. But I do find the thing of like, hey, aren't we supposed to have free speech? I find that to be a false argument. I find that to be a distraction, right? Because we all know that that's not what the First Amendment is about, right? What I want, in a more broad sense, is I want these companies to take some amount of responsibility for what they are doing to the information ecosystem and to all of us, right? So it's not just that YouTube was making money off of him. It's that what he was doing was like an integral part of YouTube's business model on every level. You know, like YouTube created an ecosystem that he thrived in and then profited off of it in every possible way. So it's not just that they were selling ads on it, right? It was that their algorithm was drawing more people to it, right? It's that they created a honeypot for bad actors like that to go into, right? So all these internet companies are based on, and I used to have this point of view too. It's a very late 90s, early 2000s point of view about the internet, right? That like, hey, we're just the platform. You can't get mad at the platform, right? You can't get mad at Google because you can get to a BitTorrent file from it, right? That was an ethos we all had. You can't don't sue Napster. Come on, they're not the ones sharing it, right? That was the way that I felt when I was, a young internet revolutionary, right? The platform isn't at fault. Now I realize that the way that these platforms are built, the choices that are made by the people who make the platform, they're not neutral. You know, it's not just an open commons that people are wandering into. They're the architects of this space. They're the ones who are creating, here's how the content is shared, here's the kind of content that's allowed, here's the content that does well, here's the content that we promote, here's how you can make money on the platform, right? Those are all choices that they make. And so they bear a responsibility for what happens on the site, period. These sites are the biggest sites possible. I mean, you know, people watch 1 billion hours of YouTube a day, I believe, and 70% of those views come from YouTube's recommendation algorithm, right?
The bigness of them is partially what's concerning to me is, you know, and with this Alex Jones debacle, it was the coordinated crackdown on him that was a little bit concerning to me. It was like YouTube, Spotify, Apple. They all acted at once, and then Twitter kicked him off after Jack went in front of Congress. And it seems like there's all this weird pressure coming from places that we're not even sure exactly where the pressure's coming from. Does that concern you at all, that side of the equation? Because he's kind of like on the front lines, and it's like if he goes, then what's going to happen next? Does that move you at all?
Yeah, I mean, it does. It's not the best situation for, you know, Tim Cook to have the final word. I mean, my guess is, look, Tim Cook is like he seems like a very like ethically driven guy in a lot of ways, you know, and it really seemed like it was like 3 people at Apple going like, you know what, we can't be having this, right? And getting rid of it. And for that to happen, for that small number of people to have that much power, yeah, that's worrisome. I'd say it's about as worrisome as, you know, it was a couple decades ago when we just had 3 broadcast networks. At the same time, I don't think that worry should get in the way of us having a more holistic conversation about the role that these companies need to play. These platforms are enabling bad information to travel lightning quick all around the world, right? And it's their algorithms that are doing it, right? So somebody needs to step up. And I would hope that we would do it in a socially coming together sort of way where we can have a conversation about what is, you know, what are the standards that we want to have as a society for information, and how are we going to do our best to push conspiracy theorists to the fringes where they belong.
You've got a live tour coming up called Mind Parasites, and from what I gather, it seems like some of it might relate a bit to what we've been talking about. Could you just give us kind of the broad strokes of what is this live tour?
Well, so this is a brand new format for me. A couple of years ago, I did an Adam Ruins Everything election special, which was all about the 2016 election history, common misconceptions. This is me. This is just Adam Conover on tour. It's not Adam Ruins Everything on tour. And it's me trying to find a new way to combine stand-up and information into sort of a live comedy event. It is sort of a synthesis of a lot of the topics we've been talking about today with kind of like a psychedelic biology class. I talk about these really wild creatures in the natural world that are parasites that control the minds of their hosts and get them to do what the parasite wants, which is some of the most fascinating biology. There's like literally thousands of species that do this, and some of them are really, really strange. They literally zombify, insects and other creatures. And I use that as a way to talk about the forces in our lives, the cultural parasites that are trying to control our behavior for their benefit. Because my show is kind of based on the idea that, and I think the name of your website is based on the idea that, reason can cause us to improve our behavior, right? That we're rational animals, and that the more that we know, the more perfect our behavior will be. And in a even broader way, our entire society is based on the assumption that humans are rational animals, that we can't be hacked, that we always choose what's best for us, that we weigh the evidence. That's what voting is based on, right? I will choose the person who speaks to me the most, right? But what I'm realizing is that we are eminently hackable, right? That by social media algorithms, first of all, but also by ideologies, by ideas, by substances, right? And I don't want to spoil too much of the show because I come at it in a couple different ways, but I talk about different ways in which I realized, I thought I was choosing this behavior, but actually my mind was being controlled. I was under the influence of something that was trying to control my behavior for its own benefit. Wow. And I think that happens a lot more than we give credit to. And I think the first step in fighting back against it is to understand that it does happen so that we can counteract those forces.
And then the new season of the show is coming up.
Yes.
Are there any big themes? Like what should we be looking for in the new season?
I'm very proud because we tackle topics that in the past we wouldn't have thought we would be able to do. So our season premiere this year is called Adam Ruins Guns, which is a topic that I used to say, you can ask my writers from our first 2 years. I used to say we will never do that topic because as soon as I tell you, hey, I'm going to do Adam Ruins Guns, almost everybody in the country thinks, well, you better say what I want you to say. You better say my side. And if you, no, I'm going to be ready. I'm marshaling my arguments right now. I'm going to change the channel, right?
The cultural identities are
People armor up right away. And so, that's one of the fault lines of American society. And I used to say, no, I want to hit them where they don't expect it. I want to go hit the stuff where, because we're only that divided on a small number of issues, right? That's like 1% of issues in the country. The other 99% of the issues, you can talk to people aren't tribal about those issues, and you can get to their heads and their hearts more effectively, right? But guns, they're so activated, it's so much harder. But we said this year, no, you know what? We've been doing the show. This is our 4th year of writing the show. We've gotten really good at it, and we really think that we can make some progress on this issue. So in this episode, we have done an episode that I feel reasonably confident that I can say that anyone from any ideological background can watch and be corrected on things, right? That there are things about guns that they believe that they are incorrect about that we correct in an entertaining and hopefully enlightening way. Now, I expect us to get a huge amount of response videos and hate mail for this segment from everybody. Yeah. And it's one of those ones where I just got to be like, hey, bring it on. If people are, if it's causing their gears to grind on that issue, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe I'll make one, and we'll see.
Please do.
Well, Adam, thank you very much for talking to us. We're looking forward to the new season, and it was a pleasure. For Reason, I'm Zach Weissmuller.
And I'm Adam Conover.